All right, Entree Architect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the Entree Architect Context and Clarity Live conversation for Thursday, January 27th, 2022. Thanks for joining us. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here. And let us know where you're joining the conversation from. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you've circled a date on the calendar and you said 2022 is my year and you're on the runway to starting your own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 28 years and you're starting to rethink or maybe even reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of small firm architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today, as usual, for these Context and Clarity Live conversations. I am joined by my co-host, Katharine MacPhail. Hi, Katharine.
Hello, Jeff.
How are things in the Boston, Massachusetts area today?
Well, we're on pins and needles waiting to see if we're going to have a blizzard.
Oh,
we
good.
aren't.
Well,
we aren't. I think
okay.
That's my bet, but I don't think we are. But people are buying all the eggs and milk and bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in Boston, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Katharine and I talk about this quite a bit. You know, the weather that I have here in Indianapolis is headed her way in a day or 2 days or whatever it is. And it's you're not going to get a blizzard.
Well,
you're going to get a lot of really, really cold.
Well, our blizzard isn't coming from you. It's coming from the ocean down into us. So that would be like a nor'easter.
Okay, what do you call that? Nor'easter. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can have your nor'easters. In the Midwest, we don't have Midwesters.
So, that was funny, Jeff.
Twisters maybe, but hopefully not this time of year.
No.
We do. All right. Let's see who has joined us today. I see John Jones from downright chilly Westport, Connecticut. I think John's first in on my screen, so he wins the John Kinney Memorial. Although, what happened to?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. He wins the John Kinney Memorial crocheted bathtub for being the first in. Am I wrong? Is somebody else in first?
I don't know, because Facebook sometimes just shows something different. People are always they're popular. What can you do?
All right, so you're looking at Facebook, which is a good reminder. If two things, if you're showing up on the screen right now that we see right on the right side of our screen as Facebook user, that means that obviously you're joining us from a closed Facebook group. You're joining us from the Entree Architect Community Facebook group, and Facebook has rules, right? They have privacy policies which say that your name and likeness can't be released from the group unless you give specific permission. So there's a URL at the bottom left of your screen right now. It's chat.restream.io/FB, as in Facebook. If you're showing up as Facebook user, I would say go to that URL. With a couple of clicks, you can give Facebook permission to release your information out to Restream, which is the platform that we use. Now, there's another possible potential situation as well. If you are commenting and you're not showing up on the screen, I would do the same thing. Go to chat.restream.io/FB. It turns out that you have to renew these permissions, I think, every 6 months. So you may have done it in the past and it may not be working now. So just go back. Again, just a couple of clicks, simple, easy peasy, and you can give Facebook permission and hopefully you'll start showing up again. But I see John first on my screen.
Okay, I have a question for you, Jeff.
Yes.
If I learned how to crochet these bathtubs, would it be okay if I did that while we're doing the show?
I think that would be completely appropriate.
I think that would be
to
good.
have you, if that's your thing, you can crochet bathtubs while we talk. That that would be actually quite amazing.
Okay, I have to learn how to crochet first, but then I'll come here and do it.
Okay, well, you do that, and I'll see if I can find a crochet bathtub pattern for you. I don't know.
No, I got the pattern already.
Oh, okay,
I got it. I'm ready to go. I just have to learn how to do it.
Okay, she's on it.
I'm on it.
Crocheted bathtubs are forthcoming. Christian's here from Ithaca, New York, and Wendy from Western Massachusetts. Ryan is from New Jersey, somewhere in New Jersey. We've never have figured out exactly where. Jefferson's joining us on LinkedIn from Los Angeles. Thanks for making the commute today and communing with us today, Jefferson. Matthew, welcome back. Mark LePage is joining us from Waxhaw, North Carolina. I see Kurt over there on Twitch, and also Scott joining us from San Francisco on Twitch. And so that means and Brian McCartney from Vermilion, Ohio. That's probably how they say it in Ohio. Vermilion, Ohio, from the YouTube channel. So I think we've got everybody but Twitter covered at this point. If you're joining this and you haven't heard us talk about this before, that we call this our simulcast. So right now we're streaming to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to Twitch, to Twitter, and to YouTube, and we have people checking in from 4 of the 5 locations at this point. So great to have all of you with us again. Thank you for joining us, and if you're just joining us, welcome. You found the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation. We're just about to introduce our special guest, as is our tradition. They're right in the green room right now, right behind us. They're eating green M&Ms. It is amazing how popular green M&Ms are with all of our guests. We've restocked. We've got green M&Ms in the green room for our special guests, and we're going to let them finish chewing, and then we'll introduce them and bring them in for this conversation today. Before that, though, we need to make one more announcement. Tomorrow, these Context and Clarity live conversations pop up every Thursday. And usually, unless you're inside the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group, that's the only time you see us. You're going to see us again tomorrow, because tomorrow is our inaugural Context and Clarity book club meeting. So we'll be back here again tomorrow, streaming to all the places, simulcasting to all the places, and talking about a book that we've been reading all month. What's the book?
You're asking me?
Remember what the book is? Yeah, what's
yes,
the book,
I do.
Katharine?
Atomic Habits. It's Atomic Habits.
All right.
By I don't remember who.
James Clear.
There you go. That's correct.
So tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, on all these same places, we'll be talking about Atomic Habits by James Clear. So I hope that you will join us. Katharine and I will be on screen with several members of the community talking about this book, and you're all also welcome to join us in the comments section here, so that we can have a great conversation about a really good book. I would say, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So that's the first, and at the end of that conversation tomorrow, we will announce the February book for the Context and Clarity Book Club, so you can start reading that book. So stay tuned. We'll let you know what that is at the end of the discussion tomorrow. All right. What have I forgot?
I think we should just tell them now, but I don't like to wait for anything. Okay.
You don't like to wait. You like to know what the rules. We established this the other week. You like to know what the rules are, but you don't necessarily like to follow the rules. So the rules are, we announce it at the end of the book club.
Okay. All right. Had to ask.
so now you know what the rules are. Okay. All right. Well, with that, we've wasted a lot of time. Let's get to our guest here. Mark wants to know if this thing is working. He's tapping his microphone right now. It is working. Welcome back. Our guest today is an entrepreneur and an innovator and a cooperative organizer. He owned a design-build architecture firm before he graduated from architecture school. And now he's co-building, co-designing, co-developing, and co-owning collaboratively and cooperatively. He's a co-founder of Coeverything in Boston, Massachusetts. Declan Keefe, welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Hey. Good to be here.
It's great to have you with us here today. And we were talking about this before we went live. As most of you can imagine, Katharine and I are fascinated by Declan's background there with the color. A few weeks ago, we had Amanda Hennessy on, and she also had a very vibrant background color. And so maybe that might be a new thing that we ask guests to do is, hey, give us a really bright, vibrant background. We love it.
Yeah, I figure if I can't say anything interesting, at least they'll be entertained by the background.
Well, most everybody out there knows that Katharine and I spend a lot of time, listening to interviews and reading articles and things to prepare for these conversations. I have no doubt that we're going to have a very interesting exploration of what you're up to here. So I'm not afraid. But
I kind of would like to work. Am I afraid?
Yeah,
No, I'm not afraid.
I thought that's where you were going. Okay.
Oh no, I'm not afraid. I just wish that I noticed it on your job opportunities because I think I'm not alone in wishing that we're doing what you're doing, but you're only hiring interns right now. So
Yeah.
I'm just planting the seed in case you think I'd like a fully 20 whatever year experience person joining me. Just planting that seed,
we
Declan.
certainly have more and more work coming in the doors, so
All
you
right,
never
cool.
know. Yeah.
And you're only in the next town over, so
Yeah.
perfect.
Your neighbors.
Yep.
Your neighbors. Short
They
commute.
have to hire me.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to the conversation between you and Mark LePage the first time that you were on the Entree Architect podcast, and I think that was episode 130. And that sticks in my mind for some reason.
It
So
was.
okay, there you go. Thank you for that. So episode 130 was the first time that you and Mark R. LePage talked on the Entree Architect podcast. And I was listening to that, and you're describing how you got to architecture, which is an interesting journey in itself. But then as you're talking about this, I hear you say that in essence, you became an accidental firm owner while you were still in architecture school at the BAC at Boston Architectural College. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. It was accidental in that I was working with a firm called Place Tailor. I was actually one of the founding members. I just wasn't an owner of the company. And we were focused on doing architecture, construction, and at the time we weren't doing real estate development yet, but we were really focused in on high performance, energy efficiency, and sort of that was our niche in the sector. And it was a interesting company in that we were what I used to call true design build, in that everyone that was a designer was also a builder. So we didn't have two different sections. It was actually you would design something and then go in the field and put the tool belt on and swing the hammer. And so I was in architecture school. I was the youngest one on the team, and then the guy who was the owner and founder was decided, because of family things, he was moving back to Israel, where he was from. And either the company was going to get shut down because he wasn't going to be in country anymore, or someone in the company could take it over. And so I said, it seems like a shame now that we've sort of really just gotten started. We were, I'd say, 3 years into it, and we had started getting some interesting press and had really cool projects lined up, that we would just close the doors now. And so I said, well, I guess I'll do it. What does that mean? And I hadn't really been thinking about the business of architecture. I was in my third year of architecture school, because at the Boston Architectural College, you work while you're in class too. So I had got that job my first year of architecture school. So I still had a couple more years left at the BAC, and it took I don't know, a little while, but I eventually decided I would take the company over. And a little bit of foreshadowing, I had made the decision with the caveat that I would take it over with the anticipation of converting it into being a worker-owned cooperative, so that other people within the company would also become co-owners alongside me, which was sort of foreshadowing the future work of Coeverything, which we can talk about how I transitioned from Place Tailor into Coeverything, sort of whenever it makes sense.
Yeah, that's it's a pretty wild story. I mean, I think about what I was doing in my third year of architecture school, and it certainly wasn't contemplating owning an architecture firm or a design build firm, for that matter. So kind of an exciting start to your career, I suppose. So you are at Place Tailor, and then you transition to Coeverything. When did that happen approximately?
So I stayed at Place Tailor for 10 years. I was owner of it, I think, for 6 or 7 years, and we were a worker-owned cooperative for 5 of those years. So I wasn't the sole owner for all of that time. And while I was at Place Tailor, like I said, we converted it to a worker-owned cooperative. And what that means is that we democratically would make decisions around the company, like big budget decisions or direction within the company. What did we want to do? What did we want to focus on? Things about brand and pay and stuff like that. Larger policy decisions. So the day-to-day runs very much like other design build firms. Not everything was done with a totally democratic and flat system. There was still hierarchy within the sort of management side of the company. But one of the things that we came to within Place Tailor was to add in real estate development as one of the like sort of three arms of the company. And we got there because what we realized is we were doing work for real estate developers, and they were the ones making all the money, and they were the ones sort of defining what the project was going to be, and they were the ones sort of having to have interactions with the community first, even before us as designers were getting there. And so one thing that we had a difficult time with, though, was we had this democratic system within architecture and construction where we had the opportunity for our employees to become co-owners. But once we got to real estate development, we didn't have any models that we saw where we could cooperatively or more democratically own the real estate asset, the development project itself. And it bothered me that we were able to develop, to actually run an architecture and construction company that was sort of proving in our area that we could do passive house essentially at the same cost as other developers. And then we started doing net zero energy buildings, and so we were sort of having proof cases within the development side of things, but we couldn't share those with the people who are impacted most by it, which is the people who live in the neighborhood or the rest of our company who's actually designing and building these things, because we just didn't have the technical models to sort of share that ownership. And so it was always in the back of my mind as we were doing this, how could we do this differently? And eventually it sort of gave birth to the idea of Coeverything, which was, no, let's actually explore what does it take to actually democratically or cooperatively or even just collaboratively work on real estate development projects. And what could that mean? What could it look like? And how would you partner with folks? And because Place Tailor was a worker co-op, presented the idea to them, they were more interested in staying focused in line with their high performance and energy efficiency work. So they continued on down that path. And me and my current co-founder of Coeverything left Place Tailor to found Coeverything to really focus on this real estate development that could be owned by the community in a more cooperative way. And so now we have Coeverything, which is a firm that does architecture, real estate development, and then what we call everything else. And so it's sort of a broad category of everything else within the Coeverything, but it runs the gamut from project management to web design to graphic design to fundraising to making videos for our clients, sort of a really wide spectrum of sort of design related things that really help make community projects go. And sort of that's what fits in that bucket. So that's the quickish version of how I got from Place Tailor into Coeverything and what Coeverything's up to.
So, I think that's really interesting when you, to me, when you started out at Place Tailor, you were really thinking about, if I can say it this way, you were really thinking about practice in a different way, design, build, to basically your minimum standard is passive house, those types of things. And I remember you talking about experimenting and trying things, being the first to try things. And now with the transition to Coeverything, it almost seems like you're just blowing up the model of architecture practice and just completely focusing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but completely focusing on what the community wants and needs. Is that fair? I mean, is that where Coeverything starts?
I would say that is sort of part of what what holds us together. I wouldn't say that that's how we got there. It wasn't like I was coming at it from the theoretical perspective of how do we break down architecture.
Sure. Okay.
I think we got there by saying, what is it that we're doing architecture for? Like, what's the whole point of these buildings out there? And our focus largely was on housing at Place Taylor, and still is largely within Coeverything. And so it's about providing places for people to live their best lives. And yet it's really this interesting thing that is sort of often left in the background with architects. It's also the largest economic driver in America is real estate. And it's like such a big part of the industry, and us as architects, we get a fee based on the percentage of construction typically. Like that's how the model usually works. And so when you think about some of these things and you realize that they could be in conflict with one another, like our homeowners actually want the cost to go down, but for us we want them to go up. And now internally, if we're the developer, we want the cost to go down. So if we were hiring another architect, then they're going to be at odds with us. And so we kept seeing that we weren't having aligned incentives with whomever it was we were working with. So the solution to that within Place Taylor was bring everything in-house. We'll be the architect, the builder, have a full staff of a build team to do everything from foundation to finish, and do development internally, raising capital and structuring deals and buying land and selling properties. And then when we got to Coeverything, we're saying there's still a stakeholder that's missing in bringing things together internal, and that's the community. And the other people who are impacted by architecture. It's the neighbors. It's the folks who are part of the neighborhood community groups who are impacted by this and come and have an opinion, but the zoning process doesn't really give them an actual say. And so a lot of architects come and are placating to community as opposed to actually bringing them in. And when we say bring them in, what we are trying to do more and more is not just have participatory design processes, which we are totally behind, but actually having the community have an ownership. So investing real money, investing real time, and being an actual percentage owner or potentially a democratic cooperative owner of a real estate development project. And then, of course, you're going to bring them into the design process and hear what they have to say. Of course, you're going to bring them in far enough to understand the economic and cost constraints that we have as on the construction side and development side of things. And so that what we've ended up finding ourselves doing is, a lot more education. And I think that sort of, it was through this process of continually analyzing what is it we're actually doing, where we ended up with a model that really does break down the way that architecture is traditionally done, but it's still from, thinking back to the, my earlier days or what we learned in architecture school. A lot of the skills that we all have is about management. Right? We're managing a lot of things and holding a lot of different strings and making sure the plates are all spinning and all that. And even more so the case when we're doing architecture and construction, even more so the case when we're doing development. And so we got good at the skill of sort of keeping a lot of things moving, which we figured could then be a useful asset to community groups who are trying to do good work in their neighborhoods with their communities, but don't have access to those skills, don't have the privilege of being white males in some instances, don't have the privilege or the relationships that come with those kinds of privileges, such as connections to the cities and bank. And we said, how can we plug in to help the community now who can be the leaders of those projects as opposed to us leading? And so there was this whole evolution from we'll lead and bring community in to where we're really working now, which is we find community groups who have projects that they're interested in doing, who are envisioning them. We help them bring those projects from vision into reality in whatever way we can. And that's why we have so many different services we offer, because a lot of these groups actually need basic things like fundraising to a rendering so they can raise money for it, to understanding a pro forma, to actually doing the design. And so we really have sort of shifted, and I think that's some of this sort of deconstruction, the way it feels, because we really flipped on its head the way in which we approach doing architecture, but it wasn't for the sake of deconstructing it.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't think I'd ever necessarily be in favor of deconstructing for the sake of deconstructing. But I think this is far enough, it's just beyond the bounds of what most of us probably think about in terms of community engagement and projects and practice and things like that. Is there an example that we could walk through to help understand, an example project? Maybe, how do you come about the project, and how do you walk through the process?
Sure. So we have a lot of different kinds of work we do, which, so one example isn't necessarily representative of all of the sort of categories of work, but one that maybe is like, pretty straightforward to like grasp how we got there, which maybe serves as a good example, is a project that was actually started by a developer who I knew for years, doing sort of traditional development work where he engages with the community, but it didn't have any direct ownership. And so in sort of the small world kind of way, actually the architect was Place Tailor. We actually didn't design this one, so my previous firm did the design work, and we were pushing the developer to actually engage with his community, which he knows a lot of them, and offer what's called a crowd fund to those people, and sell fractional shares of the development to people who live nearby. And so what we're actually doing as Coeverything is we did the consulting work around helping to structure how we would do outreach to the community. How do you reach people locally? How do you educate people around a real estate development project, and then what it means to be an investor or a crowdfunder? Help set up the project so that it could be listed on a securities regulated platform for the investment itself, and then going back through our community advisors and reaching out into the network to try to get people to actually invest. And so then they invest small amounts of money, and they're actually buying real shares of that real estate development project, which will be held as a long-term asset of some sort. And it happens to be a rental project designed by Place Tailor, so it's actually a passive house as well. And so there's different things for people to get excited about, one of which could just be owning real estate. And part of what the education that comes along with that is a lot of folks are either don't have enough for a down payment to ever own their own house. So then they think there's never a chance to own real estate. Right? If you're never going to have that much for a down payment to own a house, you think you can't necessarily be involved, but it's not necessarily true. With different types of models, and we've done it with different securities exemptions over the years, we can actually offer investments into projects, and then have, like for this project, there's actually a committee that will form of the people who have invested to be able to participate in making some decisions about how that building is managed, like who the commercial tenant might be, hiring locally for property management, about increases in rent over time. And so people are actually starting to engage in something that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And so that's just one example of a project that is, maybe an easy example, because it's like it was a traditional project, and then we inserted Coeverything into the process. And so, yeah, I don't know if that covered what you were hoping for, but
Yeah. Well, I think it paints a clearer picture of exactly how a project could start and play out. Probably a couple of months ago or so now, we talked to Jonathan Siegel, architect as developer, fame. And one of the things that Jonathan talked about was, as architects, the thing that we typically don't understand, but we absolutely have to understand, is the financial side of things. And that seems to me in looking at what you've been involved in and understanding what Coeverything is about and everything that you just described, financing is a huge part of this, whatever that means, right? And it's probably something different for every project, I would suppose. But does that ultimately become the key to the success for all of these projects? Is finding whether it's creative financing or like you said, selling off shares of projects? Is that what's basically driving um, pretty much everything that you're doing?
I'd say that financing is a big hurdle that we end up needing to get across. But it is for every project, and that's
Mhm.
really the thing that I think Jonathan Siegel's getting at too. It's always there. It's just whether the architect's involved in that part of it or not, right?
Yeah.
Um, and what we think is the more that we can sort of think holistically and align incentives between all stakeholders, community, potential tenants, the architect, the builder, all the engineers, whoever's going to finance it, the more that we can align those incentives, the more likely it is that we can do something that's more innovative. And this is sort of what we came to with Placetailor. And the innovation we were doing there was passive house, zero net energy, high performance buildings, right? You get this aligned incentives and you're more likely to be able to test a new wall section without scaring away, one party along the way. What we're trying to do here is align even more people with aligned incentives and then test. Not only are we still trying to do passive house and net zero energy buildings, but we want to do one step even further than that, which is sort of try new ways of actually owning or at least engaging community. And so I'd say the financing piece is just one of the pieces that needs to be aligned. And so sometimes that does mean non-traditional financing. And the other piece that I would say that goes along with the financing for us, that's really pretty uncommon in real estate in general, is also just the governance. And so when you think of governance as it relates to a cooperative, for instance, it's about the way in which the people who are involved are making decisions together. And so in the cooperative, the baseline for a cooperative is one person, one vote. And so everybody has an equal say. And we can have sort of what we call as a modified consensus. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to say yes to everything. It means that as long as nobody says no, we can keep moving forward. And so it means that everybody ends up being aligned by having a process and a governance process that allows for us to be aligned. And so this is also sort of clashing in the whole cooperative movement into the work that we do, and having it be the foundation for the way in which we bring together projects, even if we don't technically own them all cooperatively. Just that approach to thinking about governance, thinking about how we actually would have people have a voice and have a say in a project, changes those incentives, which allows us to do some more of the interesting and what we think of as innovative models. And part of why we're doing it, it's like our work is really pretty niche. There's it's not a really big sector of the architecture field is doing these kinds of projects. But neither was it when we were doing passive house and net zero energy 15 years ago. And so what we're trying to show is essentially pilots of a new way of doing work. Like that's really what all of our projects are right now, is testing something. And when we actually agree to do work with clients, it's part of the conversation we have is, what will we be testing in this project? What are we showing the world we can do that you wouldn't be able to do without us, right? Because we want to be able to bring value more than otherwise would be able to happen if we didn't bring everybody together, didn't align incentives. Otherwise, we're not spending our time in the best possible way. So I don't even remember what your question was, honestly. But hopefully I answered it.
I think that was a great response. It's really revealing. Are all of your projects client-driven projects?
No, not all of them. They're all with some sort of a local partner, but we do initiate some of our projects in some work, and some of them aren't even buildings. Some of them are other types of things altogether. One project we're working on is actually along the lines of the last category of like around financing. We're actually creating an investment platform for cooperatives specifically in California, and so working with a legal team around specific securities exemptions that exist in California that allows us to create an investment platform so it can bring more capital into cooperatives from the community itself. And so there's like things like that are totally internal projects that we're working on, and it's just to support sort of the network of people that we work with, and and to some degree to support ourselves and some of our partners. And that one specifically, we started another cooperative in California that's called OBI, which stands for Our Backyard, and it's a cooperative in the Bay Area that does land leases of backyards from homeowners, and then we finance 100% of building a backyard home there, and then we rent it out affordably, and we pay the homeowner a land lease. And so we're actually the developer, and we designed a prefabrication sort of technology that we're used for building these backyard homes. And so there's a construction cooperative called Arizmendi Construction that we've partnered with there. So there's a lot of cooperatives, right? There's a construction co-op, we have a development co-op. We're creating this thing called Community Investor, which is a cooperative financing mechanism, all working towards building these affordable, low carbon backyard homes. And all of those initiatives were sort of started internally, but with partners. And so it's not client driven, they're just development things. And then sort of a bit more traditional, we do work like right now, we're partnered with another developer, and we're doing co-development of a property in Dorchester in Boston, Massachusetts, a workforce housing homeownership project, 23 units, net zero. And so we're hoping that we can also have a crowdfund as part of that too. So there'll be home ownership, but part of the actual capital raising, the community beyond the people who actually buy the units have an opportunity to invest and make some return too. Yeah, it's a lot. Actually, I don't know. I'd say at least a third of our work, maybe half of our work, is sort of self-initiated.
So Jay wants to know if you mentioned how you get paid, but I think you did. You said you did, but can you say it again? I'm also kind of curious about the renting out the backyard thing. Like, do people see that as being the homeowners? Do they see that as being does it lower their property values to have this house in their backyard that is going to be there after they sell it, or do you have a hard time convincing people to do that? I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, the appraisal process is a particularly tricky one at this point, because there's not a standard practice for it amongst appraisers. In general, it's increasing the property value because there's now a revenue generating unit back there. Just imagine you had a 2-family, it's going to sell for more than you have a 1-family. That's essentially what it is we're doing. Our model's a little bit different in that technically the homeowner still owns the backyard, and we just have long-term land leases. So it's a little bit of a weird model. You see that more with large commercial properties, or community land trusts are doing things like this. So, it takes more of just like sort of understanding how the model will work. But in terms of the appraisal, it will go up. And the way that we do it is essentially we cover any expense for anything going up. So if the taxes go up because there's more value there, we cover the taxes. If there's, more expense because we're connected to the same water meter, we cover those expenses. So like all of that is internal to our development. process on that project specifically. In terms of getting paid, more broadly, I think this is part of what you were getting at earlier with thinking about finances. There's finances from a real estate development perspective, and thinking about creative ways of making a project go. And we can be creative with design, we could be creative with construction approach. But then there's just getting paid for client-based work. And that we offer different services, but it's not that different necessarily than any other service-based company when we're operating that way. We often charge an hourly rate. One of the things that we've had the benefit of is the stability that's come from some of our real estate development investments. And so it's just some money that's coming in from either selling those units that allows us to, for a perfectly mission aligned client, to reduce our rates so that we can help them see their vision through. And often what we find there is, we might be making something less per hour than we would have with some other client, but it's exactly the kind of work we want to be doing. So it's fun. The clients are great. And probably because it costs them less, they're more likely to do the fundraising they need, which then for us means they're probably going to hire us to do more work, which is sort of proving out in most of the kinds of projects we've done. Because we offer so much more, we can come in starting doing project management and helping them get off the ground and organizing amongst the community to do fundraising. But you can see where that's headed. If we are successful with all of those things, then we're in a position to be hired as the architect, and maybe we come in because we've built trust as a co-developer. And so it's really about sort of moving towards making a project more successful, building trust with our clients, or in most cases we find that we feel as though they're partners. And then the way in which we get paid might evolve during the project. It might be that we're getting paid hourly to do something, or we may even just say, we'll do it pro bono until we know whether this thing is actually going to take off or not, right? Because we believe in it, right? It's just like you would show up to a community meeting if you live next to a building and offer your feedback on design for free. No one expects when you show to a community meeting that you're going to pay everybody who's there, right? And so we think about it the exact same way. Why should we show up to a community meeting as an architect, be the only person in the room getting paid, right? We're just not really valuing the experience of the people in the room who are the community members. Or that can go the other way. I can show up to that meeting and not get paid, just like everyone else who's showing up and not getting paid in that meeting. And so we sort of really thinking about it from everybody else's perspective too, helps us think a little bit differently about how the money comes in. And then one other model that we're working on now that I think is maybe a little bit more directly related to some of the architects in the room is what we call architecture for equity. And essentially it means we work on a development project for a fee, but the fee is delayed. And essentially it means we're getting equity in the project in exchange for doing the work. And then the idea is, usually for a development project, the equity is or the architecture cost is one of the first expenses, right? It's one of the largest first expenses. And so you're carrying the interest as a developer on that longer than most anything else. And so it actually becomes far more expensive for the developer. And the interest they've paid on that architecture, if you can, as an architect, say, no, don't worry about that expense. Instead, pay me the interest down the line. Now you get your fee plus the interest on it, and you make more on your fee, and the developer can save money. And so there's just different ways, if you understand the actual economics of a development project, that you can do creative things like architecture for equity and actually get yourself as an architect in the aligned incentives with the developer, and you actually end up with more. They still save money, but you have to have some cash in the bank or be able to not take an income for a little bit of time. So, but those are the things you could be working toward, right? As if you're trying to transition into this kind of work, save up a little bit, find a partner who you might be interested in that, and then sort of pitch a creative way of working together with a developer or doing development work yourself. So it's a way to do a lot of what Jonathan Siegel's talking about without actually being the sole developer yourself. You can have some of the benefit without taking on all of the risk of being a developer all on your own.
Hey, Declan, do you mind if I ask you what you feel the difference is between the East Coast and the West Coast? Because it seems like I've tried to do, or I have been involved with some affordable housing projects in towns around our area. And there is a lot of NIMBYism, which I understand. That's why you have the OB, right? But I don't know if people are, I don't know how to put it, nicer in California than they are here about that, because I don't know. Do you think that kind of approach would work in this area, in the Boston area, for example? Trying to get people to rent out part of their yards.
Yeah. So my general philosophy around this work is the scale in which we're operating, especially when we're talking about working in cities, we're dealing with such a tiny percentage of the population. It's like what we're trying to do is appeal to the few who care. And what we need to do is get the message out to those who believe in the things that we believe in. Right? I don't need most of the city to. I don't even need 99.9% of Boston to care at all about what it is I'm doing. Because that last 0.1% is more clients that I could handle for the next 10 years. Because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are living here. And so what the challenge we have is being in such a niche right now, because we're still doing a lot of these pilots and proof cases, that we can reach those people with a really specific message around collaborative work, community engagement, and alternative ways of doing all of this work. And we found the same was true for Placetailor. It was before people were asking for really deep energy efficiency and net zero energy housing and passive house. And people would ask, well, who would buy this, or who would pay more for this if we were charging a premium? It's like, I don't know, that person who just bought this house. I don't care if everyone else didn't buy it, that person bought it. And so it's about sort of understanding what we're trying to do is reach the right people, not reach all of the people. So in terms of East Coast, West Coast, I don't know. We've found people who care about these things in both places. People know about cooperatives more in California because there's just more cooperatives there. But that's really co-op specific. I think people equally value community engagement and community participation everywhere we've gone to do work, and especially because they've been burned so many times in the community process by so many developers who are coming in and getting their feedback and entirely ignoring it, and the project still moves through because the city needs to have housing and they're just saying yes to whatever. And it's not a process that they feel good about. And so when they feel like they're really being included and actually have a genuine opportunity to own or participate in a more impactful way, then they're really engaged and excited to do that. So yeah, it's a different culture one place to the other, but I don't know that it means there's more or less work on one side of the country or the other.
So, and I completely, I was sitting here, kind of cheering in my head when you said, I don't care. All I need is, in my mind, you're saying all I need is my ideal client or my ideal situation, whatever tag we put on it. But what's the big goal of Coeverything?
It's to prove out some of these alternative models so that we have a more equitable society, a more racially equitable, a more environmentally sustainable, and sort of justice-driven approach to the way in which we do work. Because the thing that gets me is all of our work is really impactful. We can choose whether it has a net positive impact or not. And this is the thing that has driven me from day one in the work, and is that it weighs on me heavily that the work we do as architects has such a big impact. It has such a big impact on the climate. It has such a big impact on the communities in which we do work, and it has the impact on the communities in so many different ways. It sets trends for what else is going to be built there, which then sets trends for who's going to own it, which set trends for the wealth generation either staying with the people who have been there or new people coming in and getting that wealth and other people being pushed out. It sets trends for what kind of commitment from the city there is to that neighborhood and that work. So there's just so much impact that the work we do has. And when we're looking too closely at sort of just the bottom line, the financial bottom line, and we're not thinking about the people or the planet, but instead just the prosperity side of that triple bottom line, we end up having a net negative impact. It's more common that if we don't focus on those other things, we'll have a net negative impact with our work. And what Coeverything was created to do was to try to figure out ways in which all of the work we do can have a net positive impact. And so when we created the firm, one of the very first things we did was we created what we called the Good Development Project Standards. That's a really high bar for ourselves, and we can't even meet it ourselves, but it's showing us sort of a long list of things that, like, in an ideal world, every project would be able to do all of these things. It would be able to raise people up. It would raise wages. It would be more democratic in the way in which we did the governing. It would be carbon negative, and so it goes down the list of people, planet, and prosperity of what's the most positive of an impact we could have with our projects. And so what we're doing now within the company is trying to find partners, trying to create projects ourselves that allow us to work on a lot of those pieces of this good project standards. And eventually we have a vision that there will be new models of doing development that are able to include and incorporate so many of the pieces in which we're doing now. Things like community-owned solar, which is a project we're working on, to community land trusts where there's actual urban farmers who are growing local food, to the housing that's carbon zero and governed and owned by the community. And what we hope for in the future is that development can look like a model in which all of these things in which we're testing come together and become the standard way in which we do development, because everyone realizes that what we could do with the work we're doing is have such a greater positive impact than we are, and it doesn't even make any sense to do it the way we used to. So that's the ultimate vision. and why we do a lot of the projects we do is to sort of build towards that more idealized way of impacting the world.
I know that we could probably spend another couple of hours unpacking this, but I want to, maybe the way to wrap this up is, I want to ask a question, because I know I am absolutely certain that you are inspiring some of the architects in our audience right now to think about things differently, or to pursue different ideas. But I also know that I have a couple of my students who are either watching or will watch. They're paying attention to this. So I guess the question would be, for somebody that maybe they're an architect now and they're doing whatever they're not completely satisfied with the impact that they're having, or they're a student that is thinking about their future. What's one thing that they could do? What's a way that they could? You're doing a lot of things, right? You're pursuing a lot of ideas and pushing a lot of limits and boxes and things like that. But what's one thing that they could do maybe today to move towards having the impact that you're imagining right now?
I think what I would say is find the thing or the series of things that you're most passionate about. I would hope that could be something that you believe would have a a net positive impact on other people. If it's not immediately obvious that it is, maybe you could sort of explore it a little bit deeper to see how that whatever it is you're passionate about might be able to have a more positive impact on people. And then once you've sort of identified that, the thing I always recommend to people is learn a skill that your competitors don't have, and that'll be the first thing you can put out into the world to be the differentiator. It'll be, I can do this thing that other people can't do, and I care about this thing that other people don't really care about. And now everything can be about that message. And what you'll start to do, if you really not just write it on your website, but live into it, find the other people who care about it, find the groups who are meeting, and don't be afraid to show up to those meetings for free for a long time, because you're building trust with those people who care about the thing that you care about, which is why you have to actually care about it, because you're not going to go to that thing unless you actually care about it, right? You're going to let it push back to the bottom of the list because you've got too much work to get to that meeting or reach out to that person. But once you start to build that trust, your network grows so much bigger than yourself that other people will be helping you, and you'll have to stick to the thing you care about, because now you've told people you care about it, and they're going to help keep you accountable to the thing that you've said you want to do. And eventually you'll build into that more and more of the things you care about, and you'll learn more and more skills or things that you can offer that other people don't offer in the exact same way. And eventually you can sort of carve out a new way of approaching the work, as opposed to just assuming that your business needs to look like everyone else's business because that's the way everyone else does it. Yeah, I think that would be the thing I'd say is doable today. Just thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly thinking and do a little research.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, again, you can't hear the cheering that's in my head, but I think that's exactly right. At some point it starts with thinking differently, thinking about ways that you can do this differently instead of this is the way we've always done it. So I think you can probably see in the comments on the right side of the screen that there are a lot of people that have been inspired by this conversation. And the beauty is that the conversation lives on. If you are watching this live right now, of course, you can rewatch this conversation anytime you want over on YouTube, or inside the Facebook group or on LinkedIn or any of these places that we're broadcasting to now. You can share this with people in your community, whether that means your geographic community or your community of architects or clients or whoever they are. I'd encourage you to invite people to check this out. And, YouTube might be, the Entre Architect YouTube channel might be the easiest place to find it. But if you want to know more about Coeverything, the URL is in the bottom left hand corner of the screen right now. It's coeverything.co, and there's a lot of goodies there. There's a lot to absorb. There's a couple of downloads. Declan mentioned at least one of those, so I'd encourage you to go over and check out Coeverything and what everybody's working on over there. And Declan, thanks for this conversation. Chris, in the last comment there, says amazing conversation. It really was. So thank you for this. I appreciate you joining us today.
No, thanks so much for having me. And thanks for all of the positive comments over there. I'm reading through it too. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Very good. And for those of you out there in the audience, whether you're live right now or in the future, thank you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments and your support of this effort. And I say this a lot, right? Thanks for making context and clarity a thing, because without you, we would not be having this conversation with Declan Keefe right now and being inspired about thinking differently about the impact that we can have. So thank you all for that. And as always, I appreciate you, and I hope that you will take care of yourself. I hope that you will be well and be safe. Keep those around you well and safe. It's still a crazy, scary world out there in some ways. So please take care of each other and yourselves. Take a little bit of time to breathe and relax and find a way to rejuvenate, because we're going to do this all over again tomorrow. We're going to be right back here, wherever here is for you right now. We're going to be right back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern with our inaugural Context and Clarity Book Club conversation. We're going to talk about Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm really excited about this conversation tomorrow, so join us for that. And at the end of the conversation, despite the fact that Katharine just really wants to know right now, at the end of that conversation, we will share what the February book for the book club is, so you can start preparing for that conversation. But tomorrow we'll talk about Atomic Habits. So again, Katharine, thank you. Declan, thank you. All of you out there, thank you. And I hope that I'll see you, all of you, somewhere, sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.